Let's play Walt Disney Animated, a fantastic game about animation. In this video, I walk you through the steps of setup and gameplay, so get out your game and play along. Pause the video whenever you need. In this game, we're a team of animators seeking to create a number of the classic Disney animated films, while the villains are trying to stop us by creating all kinds of calamities. We win the game when we've actually successfully created our films. This is a fantastic game with rich gameplay and beautiful artwork that you'd expect from Disney. It walks you through the process of animating or creating an animated film. So let's get started with the setup. This is a cooperative game, but each player creates their own animated film. So each player should select the film that they'd like to work on. Each film has an action tile, a background board with background tiles, a wooden token or tokens for special actions, 5 calamity cards, 3 animated cells, and a villain board. When you first purchase the game, the background tiles are probably in the background board, but you can take them out and then put all the components into the film box. There is one hint that I'll mention right now about when you are building your film and putting the background in. These tiles are very tight, so a hint that you can do is to work from the inside out. And so place it from the inside and then press together. But it is a little bit challenging sometimes. Each player should take their background board for their film and place it in front of them with their action board to the right. Now the action board is double-sided. One side has stripes, and the other side has more information about the villain. The official rules suggest that you use the stripe side up first, but you are allowed to look at the villain side at any time, and this helps you know how to defeat the villain. So I suggest that you actually place the action board with the villain side up. All the information from the other side is printed here at the bottom of your action board, but you might want to flip over it sometimes because sometimes the contrast is a little bit better and it's a little bit easier to read on the other side. But in any case, all that information is here. Also, you might want to notice at the very top it says your tokens, and at the bottom it says whatever type of token that your film is associated with. For example, Aladdin has the genie token, and we'll get into that in a little bit. Go ahead and place your background tiles and your 3 animated cells to the left of your background board. Each player gets 1 magic token and places it above the Your Tokens section of your action board. At the top right of each background board is the date at which the film was released. The one with the earliest release takes the first player token, so the first player will not change throughout the game. Next, place your special tokens for your particular film underneath your action board. So for example, Aladdin has a genie token, but 101 Dalmatians has a number of Canine Crunchy tokens. Now that your players are set up, place out the studio board in the middle of the play area. These are the animation cards. Shuffle them together and place them down as a draw deck in the space on the studio board. Draw 3 cards for each player to form their starting hand. Each player has a hand limit of 7 cards. Players are working together, so the cards are not secret, so you can look at them. Next, randomly place the ink tokens in the ink and paint section. Now we collect all the villain tiles for the films that the players are working on. Remember the release date. We'll form the stack with the film that was released first on top and the film that was released most recently on the bottom. Now all the villain tiles do have a calamity effect on one side. On the other side is just the villain as they will appear in the movie. So we will place, as we build the stack, we will have the calamity effect face up. Once you've created your stack, place it on the villain space on the studio board. The deadline token looks like a little film reel, and there's a film strip looking thing with numbers on it. That's the deadline space. So take the token and place it on the start space. Now, I actually place it a little bit to the right so that it's easier to see the numbers. Now there are 5 action tiles. 4 of them are the different components of building an animation film, but the other one is Disney Magic. Mix them up and randomly place them on the bottom of the studio board in the action space section. Notice that each section has a number next to it. We'll talk about that later. If you recall, each player has 5 calamity cards associated with their film. Mix those together to form a draw deck. Do not include Calamity cards from other films. Page 4 of the rule book has a difficulty chart that's based upon the number of players. So choose your difficulty that you'd like to play with. For example, if you're playing with 2 players on a standard mode, you will choose a card that has the number 2 on it. Place the Calamity card draw deck and the reminder card to the upper right of the studio board. Now draw the number of cards from the Calamity deck based upon your reminder and place them to the right of the studio board. You've already given each player 1 magic token. Take the remaining magic tokens and place them next to the board for a supply. Now you've completed your setup and you're ready to begin the game. The game involves multiple rounds of player phases followed by villain phases. The timeline on the right of the studio board shows how long you have until your deadline. If you don't complete your film by the deadline, you lose. All players take their turn before the villain phase occurs, and each player has a reminder card that shows them the steps in the order that they need to take. The first one is select an action tile. Then we do the tile's action, or we can take a magic token instead of selecting an action tile. Then we slide the action tiles. We'll talk about that a little bit in a minute. And then we can place or use characters and remove Calamity. The villain cards show the steps of the villain phase, but they are essentially the same thing, which is you advance the deadline and then you resolve the Calamity effects. You resolve the Calamity effect for each Calamity card that still exists out next to the studio board. And then you will take the villain and put it on the bottom of the stack and refresh the Calamities cards. We'll go over that in a little bit more detail later. Now that you know your goal and the basic sequence in which things happen, the next question is, how do I actually create a film? It may be pretty obvious that you want to take the background tiles and place them into the background, but we're going to focus first on the Calamity cards to understand how the mechanics work. So there are 4 different types of Calamity cards, ones that you can't remove, but the other ones you can remove in the 4th step of your particular turn. Now notice that some of them require paint, some of them require icons from the animation cards, and some of them have a number, and we'll talk about that in a second. So let's look first at this red paint for Iago. Now in order to get rid of Iago's Calamity card, I want some red paint. So how do I get this paint? If we look on the left-hand side, we see numbers associated with the paint. So that means that any paint in this row will cost 1. Any paint in this row costs 2, 3, and 4. Now, if we look at the action cards, as we've noted before, there are numbers to the upper right, and that's the value of those actions. So, for example, if I use the ink and paint action at this point in time, then I get the value of 2. So I could purchase 2 paint of value 1 or 1 paint in the 2 row. Since red is in the row that costs 2, I can take that red paint token as my action of doing the ink and paint action. However, I could have also picked a wild paint color that could match anything, and it only costs 1, which would give me another 1 that I could spend to get either the white, black, or green paint. So let's return the red and get the wild and black. Now that I've selected all of my paint, and only after I've selected all the paint, then we drop down all the colors, filling up spaces in the column where we took the paint. So that was step 2, do the tiles action. Step 3 is to slide the action tiles. And what that means is we pull out the action tile that we had just used and move all the ones to the left up and fill in the space. And so now that action tile that we used goes down to the bottom. So as a result, you want to choose the most powerful actions that you can, and they become weaker on the next time. So now we're at step 4, and we can remove the Calamity by discarding a red paint. So we will discard the wild paint token for the red color, and Iago will now go into the discard pile. When you discard paint, it will fill in one of the empty spaces in the paint rows. And since these two spaces are at the same row, you can fill in either spot. Now, if there was a space that was lower down, it needs to fill that lowest space. Now let's look at the remaining cards that we have. We have, for Aladdin, this icon, which is called Grit, and the other Calamity card has a number 3 on it. Now, icons are found on the animation cards, and so we get new icons by doing the animation action. And fortunately, this happens to be in space 3. So for the Calamity card that has a number 3 on it, all we need to do is perform the action number 3, and it doesn't matter what that action is. Now, if I decide to do action number 3, I can remove the Calamity card immediately. I don't have to wait until the 4th step of my turn. And the reason is because I've already determined what action I'm going to do, and it makes it easier to remember. Now, you might think if the animation has a value of 3 that I could draw 3 animation cards, but that's not quite correct. You look on your action board next to the animation icon, and it'll tell you how many animation cards you can draw. So if I use a value of 3 or 4, I can draw 2 animation cards. So it's important to pay attention to the action board to see exactly how to resolve each of the actions. And again, this information is on both sides of the board. So if I happen to have one of the animation cards with the symbol that matches the Calamity card, I can discard my animation card and then remove the Calamity card. So now that you know how to resolve the turn for each player, let's jump to the villain phase. So in the villain phase, the first thing that we'll do is advance the deadline. The next thing we do is we resolve the Calamity effect for each Calamity card that exists. So right now we only have one Calamity card existing, and so we do whatever the card suggests. So here we're supposed to discard 2 paint tokens or 1 Canine Crunchies token. So if I had those, if I can do it, I have to do it. But if I'm not able to complete that action, then I increase the deadline by 1. And once I've resolved the effect, I discard the Calamity card. Since there are no more Calamity cards existing, I take the villain card and put it on the bottom of the stack, and now I refresh the Calamity. What that means is that I draw more Calamity cards equal to the reminder number that I set up at the beginning of the game. I don't shuffle the discard pile into the stack. I only do that if we are empty. The draw deck has become empty. Okay, you actually know enough now to go through some basic rounds, so you might want to pause the video and practice going through some rounds and focus specifically on trying to resolve Calamity. To fill in the background, use the background action. The number represents basically the size of the tile that you can place. And if you look, there are all multiples of this, essentially a 1 by 1 inch tile. If you flip over the tiles, on the back of them, they have numbers showing how many of these 1 inch square tiles fit in that area and the value of the tile. So for example, to place this tile, it would require a background of value 4. If you'll notice, there's icons on the background so that if you use a tile that covers that area, and of course it needs to match the background pattern, you get this extra action. So for example here, if we place this size 4 tile, we would have had to have used a background of value 4, but we would then get also an animation action of value 4. Now, of course, you want to use actions the higher they are in the value position, but sometimes the actions that you want to do are in low value positions. That's where the magic tile is very helpful, because if you turn in a magic token, you can use that magic tile for any of the other actions at the value where the magic tile is. So for example, I could use it for sound of 4, ink and paint of 4, animation, or background of 4. Now, if you pay very close attention to the backgrounds, you'll notice that they're all divided into 3 sections. And you want to really be aware of that because once you've filled in the background, you can then place a character on top of that area. So in order to place Jasmine, this entire portion of the background has to be filled in. So if I start working on different parts of the background, it's not going to help me. However, once that background is filled in my step 4, place or use characters, I can place a character by discarding the paint colors that are shown on the background tile. So for example, if I turn in a blue and black, I can place the Jasmine cell on the background. Now, when I do that, I get the special action associated with Jasmine. I can do that once per turn, and when I place my character down, I get that for free. However, in following turns, I have to turn in or discard an animation card with this icon in order to get this special action. Now, the final action that we can talk about is the sound action. And the sound action triggers a very special action associated with that particular film and the tokens associated with it. So you can kind of think of it as the voice of the film. So you'll have to read the details of each particular action card to see exactly how that sound action works for your particular film. Now, once you've completed your background and placed your characters, you can place your villain into the film by following the requirements specified on the action card. Now, once you've met those requirements, you place your villain tile with the calamity side down on top of your action board, and you have completed your film. But that doesn't mean the game's over. Everyone has to complete their film in order for the game to be over. You will continue to take your turns and help the other players complete their films and defeat the calamity. Now that you set things up, let's talk about how to play the game. The key resources in the game are the paint, the icons associated on the back of the animation cards,